Well, hello, everybody. Welcome in. Happy Tuesday night, December 7th, 2021. The NBA season is a month plus deep. We have 3 games on the slate tonight. We're talking basketball up until 5 minutes of 6 before the night slate of Madden. Brendan Glasheen with a pair of DraftKings content specialists and Matt Meiselman and Chirag Hira. I just love saying the title. I think it's very fancy. I think it makes you two sound very intelligent, and I really do believe you both live up to your titles. So welcome to both of you. Looking forward to it. Meiselman is really bummed out, Chirag. He did not put he couldn't anyway. He's not allowed to, but there was a 2-point conversion last night in last night's football game, and he was proud to bring that up after our show. So Meiselman, anything you need to get off your chest as it relates to basketball, 4-point play potential tonight, be sure to get it out there before the show is over.
Yeah, I just have to apologize to everyone because it was the first thing I thought of when we got off air was like, oh, what if they don't kick extra points? 2-point conversions are a thing. And then it hit on the first drive. It was the only attempt at the game. So maybe I was really excited about it when it was 8-0. And then, yeah, that was the only one. So maybe it wasn't actually that great of a call. But anyway, yeah, we'll move on to basketball. I don't have to remain upset about this. It's in the past.
Chirag, how are you feeling about the NBA at this point in the season? Do you have a big picture thought on what we've seen so far in the association and how you're approaching daily fantasy or betting on the NBA?
Well, I've really honed in thanks to our boy Matt here. Had a billion things going on before, but I feel a lot more comfortable now because it's NBA and you have to be really on point with the news. And so I got this sweet new Apple Watch and literally get alerts to let me know when lines are moving or when injury news happens. So I'm like, all right, let's go. Let's handle this. So otherwise, I would not be as attentive with it. There's so much going on. But yeah, I think the big picture thing is Curry is absolutely demolishing it. And the only way that he's not going to be the MVP is if he gets hurt. Knock on wood, he doesn't get hurt. 16 trades later, he's going to be the leader of all-time three-pointers made very soon. Outside of that, I think the Lakers are playing horribly. I don't see them as a championship contender. And who knows who's actually going to come out of this. There's a lot of question marks. I didn't think the Warriors were going to be this strong this early on, but I'm sure the Suns will have something to say about that. And then when we get to the East, the Bucks will surely have something to say to the Nets. And I thought the Miami Heat were going to compete there too, but maybe they have it later and they've had dealing with a lot of injuries, but let's not sleep on the Bulls. I've liked the Bulls since all the moves they made. And now with DeRozan out, we're going to see if Lonzo can step up, if other players can step up. I expect Vucevic to play a bigger role. He's been really coming on of late. He's been scoring 30 points consistently, easily. But outside of that, I think there's just a lot of new and exciting stuff to do. Just focus on the news. That's really what it is.
Apple is not a presenting sponsor of this show, but good for the Apple Watch to help out Chirag these days and get all of his news on line movement as well as injuries in the NBA. It's true. The DK Nation alerts, they pop right up on the watch. It's fantastic. Meiselman, what do you got? What's your, I think we've talked more often than Chirag and myself because we've had some fill-in situations going on. So we've been together, I think, kind of routinely here. But what are you feeling right now on the NBA right now, Meiselman?
So everything's kind of great right now because I think we've reached a point in the season where rotations have really solidified and it's just much easier to figure out what will happen in certain situations. Certain players are out and it's kind of like we know better at this point who's stepping up, who isn't. And then we just have a better idea of who the good and bad players are. Like sometimes at the beginning of the season, there are certain players that are just rusty or someone had a bad offseason or an injury they're trying to recover from. And there's just a lot of uncertainty as far as like how good a certain player is. This is someone we're definitely going to talk about a bunch tonight in Julius Randle, where like he last year seemed to have made some significant strides forward. And it was a different season than what he's played in the past. Like last year, I think he won the Most Improved Player of the Year award.
Yep.
And then this year, he just has kind of reverted back to what he was before last year. So it's been good to have now a couple months for these things to sort themselves out. And I just generally feel much more confident in being able to assess like who the most valuable players are in each team. because the news, like, you have to react quick if you want to try to like bet as news comes in. And in a lot of cases, it's like, this player just got ruled out. He's a big name, but he's not actually that good of a player. Or his backup is really good, right? Like that could matter too. So just at this stage of the season, it seems just a lot more apparent where certain teams are gaining and losing when news breaks.
And I think we're all pretty comfortable at this point, not just this year, but in previous years, that stars will miss games, not because of protocols, but just because it's a load management night or a rest night, depending on what the situation is and how it presents itself. That has come up from time to time. In a situation like tonight, there's only one borderline star not playing. That's Jaylen Brown for Boston. But Luka, Kristaps, LeBron, AD, they're all good to go. Harden and Durant are going to be in there tonight as well for the Brooklyn-Dallas game. Chirag, I know you touched on it briefly, but we need a state of the Lakers, please. Like when you say they're not contenders, I think the three of us had this discussion about Lakers to miss the playoffs at plus 700. They are, I think, still in there, right? They'd be a play-in team.
Yeah, I wouldn't go that far. I wouldn't go as far as saying that the Lakers are going to miss the playoffs at this point. I still think that they have a level that they can reach if LeBron gets it together and brings everybody. It's basically, can LeBron bring it together? Because he will have to be the primary facilitator to really make this team thrive. Russell Westbrook, sure, he's a great point guard, but honestly, he's better just in the open court or going off of double team screens, picks, whatever, stuff like that. But state of the Lakers, I don't believe that they have it completely in them, but these are veteran guys. So maybe they have this magical switch that they turn on because they say, hey, it's past the All-Star break. So now we know we need to pump it up, but this team hasn't been playing good defense. The offense is a little bit stagnant, but I think if they get their reps under them, they're not going to miss the playoffs. That's not happening.
That's right. We discussed this. We were trying to come up with trade ideas, and you're like, there's nothing. There's nothing there. The buyout market is going to be their friend.
Buyout market.
Yeah, they're going to get Derek Favors in a couple months. So that's like all they got.
There you go. Kemba Walker, I feel like could be a good fit there.
For sure. Yeah, that's definitely.
Honestly, the way that Kemba Walker has been cheering on the Knicks on the side there, I honestly don't think they let go of him because you never know what could happen. They have guys that are somewhat injury prone as well. So you never know when you need to inject that guard back into the game. And there could be an opportunity where, this team has really struggled. So they're contemplating another starting lineup change. So what's to say that Kemba Walker won't be back into the rotation after January, February?
That's true.
I think it's too early to just write Kemba off, and maybe he gets some therapy, gets his knee under him, but that guy has been a glorified cheerleader. And when you watch Knicks games, like he is cheering.
Yeah, he's come around on it, right? I think he's also kind of accepted how it finished in Boston. There is still, I think, some light at the end of the tunnel with the Knicks. Because to your point, say something happens to Rose, he slides right back in. He has a role in that basketball team. So I think he's kind of accepted. That's where he's at in his career with the knee injuries as of late in his career. Kemba Walker.
It's sad to see.
It is.
But,
he got a big contract. He'll be okay.
Yeah,
he'll be okay. Well, to use that talking point, the Brooklyn Nets, Chirag hit on this as well. The Milwaukee Bucks might have something to say. The Bulls are in second place. They beat the Nets twice. And just kind of using a futures angle to this, before we get really nitty-gritty into the three games tonight, if you're the Brooklyn Nets, do you want Kyrie Irving back at this point? I mean, maybe you do need him to beat Milwaukee, to beat Chicago with that loaded backcourt. Meiselman's a big Alex Caruso fan and what he brings to the table, that intensity he delivers for Chicago. But looking at the odds now, Brooklyn at plus 130 to win the conference. There's Milwaukee at plus 300. The Bulls are plus 1,600 to win the conference. Where are we at with the Nets? Like, are the Nets fine? Do they need Kyrie Irving?
They don't need him, but they are going to be underdogs in a series against Milwaukee without him. So okay. I think even without Kyrie, the Nets are somewhere around second to fourth best team in the East. I think a healthy Miami could be better. I think Philly, if they get their roster resolved in some way, whether it's Ben Simmons playing and playing well or a trade where they bring in someone else, I think that fully healthy Philly team is better than the Nets without Kyrie. But if you put Kyrie Irving back there, I think that the Nets do have a case for being the best team in the East. So it's not like they can't win the championship without him. I just think that they're going to be an underdog to win the championship without him. That line plus 130 only makes sense if Kyrie Irving is playing during the playoffs.
Yep.
But I think that like I mostly agree with, the top of the odds for both conferences. We still have the Lakers number 2 in the West, which I just find to be absolute insanity. And honestly, like I still think plus 350 is a good bet to miss the playoffs. I'm not saying I think that they will. I don't know that it's more than 50%, but you don't need it to be more than 50% for plus 350 to make sense. So like, I don't see how they improve. They have aging veterans leading the team. I mean, I think they can turn it on at times, but for them to get into, let's say, like the top 8 seeds, I think they're going to have to turn it on for an extended period of time, or like Kendrick Nunn is going to have to come back and be like much better than what he's been so far in his career, or Trevor Ariza.
Vogel said that he should be coming back, so there's a chance.
Yeah, I just don't know how good he actually is. Like he'll make a little bit of a difference, but I don't think he's like a needle mover in any significant way. So and then at the same time, they have to avoid more injury problems with LeBron and Davis. And the idea that Westbrook will figure it out, like I just don't think that ever is happening, because he just has too much of a track record of being a negative asset as far as winning games.
That's a good point. So you think at plus 130, that's a line that feels right if Kyrie Irving was indeed going to be back as a contender in the Eastern Conference for a playoff run. What about Golden State, though, Chirag, at plus 290? That's without Klay Thompson. How much does that change when Klay Thompson returns?
I mean, honestly, I feel like the line's baked in a little bit that Klay Thompson's going to come back. And is he going to integrate seamlessly? Who's to say? They've been playing really well. Their off guards have been playing well off of Steph Curry, too. I think that Klay is going to need some time. He's not going to be able to go play 30, 37, a 40-minute playoff game, stuff like that. They're going to have to really rely on their depth, and they've picked up really strong guys that can fit into their system. And I think that's more important than being like a great basketball player overall. Like in terms of rating wise, I think it's better to find guys that can fit into the system well, that cut well, set screens well, and will play their role, and let Klay Thompson do his thing. I just think that they have all the pieces. They already know how to win. They have the coaching, they have the depth, they have what it takes. And Steph playing at this level, it's really difficult to fade them. I don't see how they don't come out of the West. Only the Suns can really stop them, because they have the actual depth as well. And them having DeAndre Ayton in addition to Devin Booker, who can go to that same level as Steph, and then having Chris Paul, I think the Suns are the only other option that can compete with Golden State right now.
Yeah, their wings on the head-to-head matchups last week were fascinating as far as how Phoenix matches up with their guards defensively. Like that is evident. They can bring that to the table. And to your point, if Klay comes back, how does that impact a Jordan Poole who is getting starter minutes? How does that throw a wrench into his game? Gary Payton, it changes a lot of things for sure.
But also looking at just the way that Golden State defended in those 2 games. The first game, they started with Draymond on CP3 to give him length, and they were unable to really push that off. The second game, they came back and they went with Wiggins on CP3. So I think that's what's really going to make it, because originally a normal Golden State lineup with the healthy Klay would probably be Klay Thompson guarding CP3 to try to shut him down. So his defensive presence is going to be the biggest part of it when he comes back. Is he going to be a net negative on defense? We already know what he can do on offense. You leave him open, he's going to knock it down. But how are these injuries going to affect him on defense, and how much of a shutdown guy can he come back and become?
I've got one more big picture question for the both of you, and it's a report today from Shams Charania about the Indiana Pacers. They're trying to rebuild their roster. Trade talks around Karis LeVert, Domantas Sabonis, Miles Turner. Now, we could take this in 2 different ways. We could talk about maybe a contender, East or West, that could use one of these players and makes you feel better about their futures. Or, because Sabonis is so impactful from a DFS standpoint, do either of you have a destination in mind when you'd see Sabonis and say X team, you're like, oh my goodness, this is great. This is a perfect fit. This is going to make him even better as a DFS player. But say they go to contenders. Maybe Sabonis loses value as a DFS weapon on some nights because he is the dude for the Indiana Pacers when he's playing. Do either of you have a thought and an angle on this report today from Shams about the Pacers?
Well, I'll say some negative comments about the Pacers and the Warriors, and then I feel like I need to say some more optimistic things because I'm feeling a little bit cynical with just like the takes I'm giving. But just quickly about the Warriors, weighing in on the Pacers. Like, I don't think the Warriors are the best team in the Western Conference. I think the Suns are the best team. They just played each other twice, but Devin Booker played only half of one of those games. In the second one where Booker was out, Mikal Bridges also missed a significant portion of the game. And the reason I still think this, even with Klay, is because I actually think the Warriors will be worse, more likely than not, when Klay Thompson comes back. He hasn't played in 3 years, basically. Like, the idea that he's going to be able to be even close to what he used to be, I just think that that's wishful thinking. It's very exciting. If he does do it, the Warriors are probably the best team in the NBA. Like, if Klay is just 2016 Klay, then sure, like, they're the best team. But this is 2 major leg injuries that he's had. And specifically on defense, where Klay actually, like, I don't know if people really realize this, Klay was an excellent defender when he was in his prime. Like, right. You don't just come back. I mean, he'll be able to hit open threes most likely the way he used to. But other than that, like, the rest of his game, I just don't see it being like it used to be. And yeah, he's taking away minutes from guys that have been playing really well, including the Warriors' best defensive player, Gary Payton, who's been really, really good for them. And he's probably playing a role when Klay plays. So I still think the Suns are the best team. I think you get Kawhi back on the Clippers. They're just as good, if not better. I think Jamal Murray coming back to Denver makes a huge difference. I think Utah is still right there. So I think any of those teams at full strength, those are big caveats with the Clippers and Nuggets. I think at full strength, those teams are better than Golden State. And then with the Pacers, like, I just don't think Sabonis is that good of a real life player. I think he's a great DFS player. So right. To your point, like, yes, he's going to lose DFS value if he goes to a contender. But maybe change of scenery, like there's something there where he'll improve his defense if he's playing on a team that has a better defensive system. I actually do think Miles Turner makes a bigger difference for winning games because he's so good on defense, and maybe like Miami wants to trade for him now that Bam's going to be out a while or something like that. I would be more excited about Miles Turner moving, but it does seem like the Pacers are just kind of in mediocrity and like they need to do something to either, move to the bottom and tank and get a higher pick or make an upgrade. Like, they can't just stay where they are and expect to have any results. But beyond that, like, I think we should, before we dive into the slate, talk a little bit about like the fringe playoff teams, because the Pacers are there, obviously. But the thing I wanted to say that was positive is the teams. So I think there's a good chance the Lakers miss the playoffs still. And maybe it's worth mentioning like the teams that I think could get there instead. The San Antonio Spurs are 13-1 to make the playoffs. I do not understand that whatsoever. And what I also don't understand is why the Grizzlies are only a little better than even money to make the playoffs. Like, Ja Morant is really, really good offensively. He's a bad defensive player. And the Grizzlies, the rest of their roster, like, they've won every game since he went out. The Grizzlies have a really deep team. So I know I've been like rambling on a bunch of different topics here, but like,
no, you're good.
Grizzlies and Spurs as make the playoff bets. They're obviously very different kinds of bets because one's very long odds, one is like actually a favorite. But I really like both of those teams. Like, those would be my picks if the Lakers are going to wind up on the outside looking in. One of these two, if not both, gets in over them.
Okay. Plus 140 on the other side. So not as enticing as far as the odds, but very good. All right, Chirag, anything to add before we go to tonight?
I mean, DeJounte Murray has stepped up and become a superstar for the Spurs. That, I think that's one of the more or less slept on players in the league right now. If you look at his salary right now too, he's over $9,000. So it's not like his salary hasn't adjusted to his great play, but he is an elite defender with length, and he brings it offensively now too. So I think it makes a lot of sense to see the Spurs potentially creeping up and getting into this. Popovich is a great coach. He knows how to bring in a system. Jakob Poeltl's back, and he's been playing a little bit better. They have guys that put the pieces together, and they went out there. They spent in free agency, so it's not like they're just like, oh, we're just going to tank this. Yeah, their pickups weren't great. They picked up Thad Young, Doug McDermott, and those kinds of guys that are not like, oh my God, these are needle movers, but they're still solid rotational guys that do their job. And that's really what's more important in a system like Greg Popovich. Do your job, play your role, and hit your shots when you're open. And those are the type of guys that they got. So I think that the Spurs make some sense, but it would have to take an absolute just drop off right now from the Lakers. And I still think that, I'm telling you, the Lakers will literally try to just turn it on after the All-Star break.
Well, it's not like the Spurs have to be likely to make the playoffs to make this worthwhile. Like I still think the most likely outcome is the Spurs don't get in. They probably wind up as the 9 or 10 and don't advance through the play-in because they have to win 2 games in that scenario. But 13-1 is crazy. Like they're a bubble team, and their record's only 8-14. Jakob Poeltl missed a handful of games. I think it was like 4 or 5 games because of COVID protocols, and like they need him. They basically have a couple guys that are really important that they would be in trouble without. Derek White, too, really good defender. Murray, obviously. Drew Eubanks is not nearly as good as Poeltl. Like that was a problem for those games. So with him back, and I think we're gonna have to talk about them tonight too, because Poeltl's underpriced, and then I don't think anyone's sleeping on DeJounte Murray anymore. Like clearly what solidified it is probably they beat the Warriors on the road over the weekend. Like the Warriors had just beaten the Suns, and I guess it's like a letdown spot, whatever. But they went into Golden State and they won the game outright. They were like 10-point underdogs. So I think at this point, people realize how good Murray really is. He's like up there. He's number 3 in most improved player of the year odds. But yeah, it's 13-1. Like it doesn't need to be that good. They have a shot. They have a real shot. Yeah, for sure. Or just a big sprinkle, but it's they definitely have a shot.
Okay.
But it's basically expecting that the Lakers will fall out, because I think the Nuggets are going to hold on to that because of Jokic, just the way that he can hold that team together. If Murray comes back, and they already are dealing with MPJ, like he's out of the rotation, so they need to worry about him. But are you seeing potentially maybe the Mavs also falling here, or is
the team I think could fall out? I wouldn't have said it a week ago. Is Portland. Like their roster's really banged up. Like I wouldn't be shocked to see them just start selling off because it's just not working.
Well,
what's selling off? If they get they trade McCollum for Simmons, and like the rumor said, that might actually take this team to another level.
They can move in either direction, I think, to a significant extent.
Yeah. Meiselman deep down, Chirag, just like me, we're still pretty bitter with Portland. So he's actually.
I think they lost to Philly like a month ago.
That's what it is. That's exactly why he thinks Portland will drop. That's really what his reasoning
Portland's been good to me since, but yeah, I'm still mad.
All right, we've got 3 games on the slate tonight. We'll start with the sports book. There was movement this morning until now. Also movement since we started this show. The Nets and Mavericks on the slate, Knicks at the Spurs, Celtics at Lakers. So all out of conference matchups, West versus East. And the Mavericks now are 2-point dogs. LUKA and Kristaps Porzingis are both probable. Meiselman, the line was +4 this morning. What makes you think there's been movement? Of course, getting clarification on the 2 stars for Dallas playing has something to do with that. Yeah,
certainly. So I think that it was baked into the line that LUKA might not play, but we got an update that he practiced yesterday. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't sure he was going to play, but it seemed likely enough. The one reason why maybe there was some skepticism is Dallas is playing at Memphis tomorrow. So from like a playoff implication standpoint, I get like this is the Nets. This is a bigger game in terms of like playing a better team, but tomorrow is a huge game for them in terms of like the division and making the playoffs and all that. So maybe that was the reason that the line was initially where it was. There was some speculation that it's just an Eastern Conference team. It's the Nets, that it's a big deal, but like it's actually not that big of a deal. The Memphis game is the one that's a big deal. But for whatever reason, LUKA's going to be out there, so the line came down. And then Tim Hardaway Jr. also had been questionable, and he's playing. I actually am not convinced that Porzingis will be out there tonight. He's listed probable, and I think he's had more serious health concerns. I mean, he definitely has in the past, so there's more reason just to be worried about him in general than LUKA. But with this back-to-back, like I think there's a chance that maybe we get another update and Porzingis doesn't play. But I actually I don't think Porzingis matters enough to not like Dallas. I think that this game is pretty close to a coin flip. +110 is approaching fair, +4, and it was like +150 on the money line. those lines were just based on not knowing if Luka would be in. So it's really like that's the main thing driving this. But it is interesting that they have this back-to-back in a really important game tomorrow. And depending how this game goes, like Luka may have to sit that one. And I just mentioned Memphis as a playoff bet, like they're minus 160 or so. They're still plus money to win the division. If they win tomorrow, like they're in the driver's seat. It's very early in the season, obviously, but like assuming Memphis wins tomorrow, they should be favored for that over Dallas. So I'm just kind of saying all that to express concern over like maybe the Mavericks change their mind and we see them rule out some guys that we previously thought would be in.
Interesting. Okay, so maybe Luka wants to play against the Stars on the other side.
There's also a national TV game tonight, so that plays a little bit into it. I that's my take is guys love playing on national TV.
Yep. And Meiselman, to your point, who's to say that what if Brooklyn gets off to a fantastic start and they say, all right, we're down 20, we'll sit them fourth quarter and they'll figure it out tomorrow. But I feel like that happens all the time. Well, we got a back-to-back. You're going to sit the fourth quarter. We have a game tomorrow. That's, of course, if Brooklyn is blowing them out, which that's not a sure thing. Okay. Chirag, you have a thought on any of these games? I know we'll get to the Lakers and the Celtics, but there was line movement as well with the Knicks and the Spurs. Spurs were at plus 2.5. And now this, Meiselman, you're predicting this could be a back and forth as far as possibly a pick 'em in the line moving both directions.
Yeah, the line is moving in both directions. And I initially, when I pulled up the slate this morning and I was looking at it, I thought that the Knicks going into San Antonio can actually pull this off. San Antonio is playing on the second night of a back-to-back. They played last night against, what was it?
They were on the road in Phoenix.
Yeah,
so
they're on the road in Phoenix, and they had a good game. Like they came back. They had a really difficult game. The Phoenix was way ahead, and San Antonio fought all the way back to make it a game. Then they're traveling back home, whereas the Knicks had a day off to kind of digest it. They got destroyed in their Sunday game, and the team was really upset. Julius Randle was going off, But I just like the Knicks coming off these like random scenarios where they play really poorly and there's a lineup change that can happen. They get this like boost of energy to at least start the game. So maybe it makes more sense to take the Knicks in the first half spread than it does to take them in the full game line on the road. Maybe they come out with a lot of energy. There's a lineup change that boosts it because we know that the Knicks bench has actually been carrying them. So maybe that change helps them in that first quarter and also holding on to the second half. So maybe the Knicks don't pull this game out. It's a coin flip right now. The line keeps moving, but maybe the best bet is actually look at Knicks first half.
Ooh, Knicks first half, the Julian Edlow special. At least last year it was. Anyone know who that is? Julian Edlow?
Maybe.
He's okay.
Some guy.
But looking at the schedule for the Knicks, just looking at box scores, it's true. Like they've rarely been blown out back-to-back nights. Now I know they've lost 3 straight, but 2-point loss to Brooklyn, 4-point loss to Chicago. They get blown out. They lose.
And that
14.
loss to I think what was it, Chicago, where Julius Randle got a tee with less than 90 seconds remaining, and it was basically a tie game. And it's like, wait, and he was so angry about that afterwards. So I don't remember if it was the Nets or the Bulls game. I was watching both of those, but that game, both of those games were super close. So it's not like it's an overreaction. And I don't think, and I mentioned this to Matt, I don't think the Spurs have the same level as the Knicks that they can get to. The Knicks just have a handful of better players, and I think they should be able to pull this one out tonight.
Yeah, off a loss, they've been good. Off a loss, they've been in the game. That's for sure. Right now, Spurs still getting 1.5. You can get the Spurs on the money line at plus 100. I think Meiselman's backing San Antonio to make the playoffs. Right? I mean,
and to win this game,
that streak starts tonight for San Antonio.
Yeah, right. They lost their last game. No, I think that they probably win this game tonight too.
Okay.
I will leave the caveat of the Knicks rotation could potentially change things. If we see Emmanuel quickly starting and RJ Barrett playing less minutes, I think that gives the Knicks more of a boost. The Knicks supposedly good players have not been good. Julius Randle's been one of the worst players in the NBA this year. And I think it's one of two things. Either Randall never was that good in the first place, and last year was just an outlier. He just played over his head for a number of reasons. Maybe he shot better, like not having fans in the stands. Like maybe that was the thing. The other possibility is that he actually did make tangible improvements, but he played so many minutes and into the playoffs that he just got worn down, and now we're never going to see that again. So he could like just turn it on again. I will grant that that's a possibility, but I don't know why we should expect that, because we basically have this outlier season from last year, and the rest of Randall's career, he's been like kind of an average player who just does a lot of volume, but in terms of efficiency, he's just not that good. And we haven't seen RJ Barrett develop into a good player yet. Like I think the Knicks' best players are their other guards like Derrick Rose and Alec Burks and Quickly. And the best players in this game are on the Spurs. Like it's Murray, it's Pirtle, and maybe it's White. Like I don't know why. I mean, I know why people would think the Knicks have a better team than the Spurs. It's last year the Knicks made the playoffs. But I actually like the Spurs roster. And I think I literally said the last time I was on the show, is 2 weeks ago, that the Knicks and the Spurs are like the same team. They're both well coached. Everyone on both teams is basically average, with the exception of like one or two above average guys. No one's great. They just kind of play pretty consistent. And I still think that. I think that the Knicks and Spurs are similar teams. The reason I don't think the Knicks will make the playoffs is the East is just going to be harder to get through this year. The West is a lot more wide open. But the Spurs are at home. Like you have a coin flip game. Basically, if they were on a neutral court, the Spurs have home court advantage. And even though it's a back-to-back, they're still at home. So I don't think it's as big of a deal. It's not like they're traveling from Phoenix to New York. They're just coming back home. It's not as much of a problem. Obviously, this game could go a number of ways because we don't even know what the Knicks rotation will look like. Maybe we see Kemba Walker come back in or something like that. But I'm leaning towards the Spurs winning. And if you can get, at some point, maybe this line bounces back up and it's plus 105, plus 110, like then it becomes even more enticing. But I don't know, maybe it's 52-48 that the Spurs win. I just think like these are very even teams and the Spurs are at home.
Spurs sport one of the best NBA against the spread records this year at 13-9. They are home. We have not discussed Celtics Lakers yet. LeBron AD, they are probable. No Jaylen Brown for Boston. Lakers, and this is a difficult stat record to read because of LeBron and AD being in and out of the lineup. But the Lakers, as we know, very public team. 8-16 against the spread. Boston 13-10-1. They've had Brown in and out of the lineup throughout the course of the year. Chirag, what's your take on this game? Do the Lakers cover?
It's a 4-point spread right now, right? So
it's actually the one that hasn't moved compared to the other two games.
Yeah. And I believe that there's a bit of a motivating factor after Jason Tatum completely torched them in Boston. I think he has another opportunity here to torch them again. He scored 50 fantasy points in 3 straight games. He's playing extremely well. He might be the stud to build around tonight, but there's just a situation here where the Lakers need this game. It is a big, big game. You don't want to lose to Boston both times. As a Lakers fan, you know that you cannot lose to Boston. So maybe there's that motivation factor coming into play.
Yeah.
But I would just
they got blown out in Boston. You're right. That was Tatum had a game and the Celtics blew him out rather handedly. That's right.
In the fourth quarter. They were there. They lost it. Basically, the grip was let go in the third. The Lakers have been an extremely poor team in the third quarter. So if you see that the Lakers are playing well in the third quarter, hey, take this. I just think it makes more sense to take the money line than the spread. I think this is a game that comes down to the final possession. Maybe it gets to 4 because of some free throws, but that's how I see this game playing out.
Meiselman, you have a thought on this game?
I honestly don't have a strong feeling about betting for this game. I'm glad that Chirag mentioned Tatum because for DFS, like that's going to be the focal point to look at. For betting, I kind of think this line's fair. Like I do think that maybe it's being priced in that, I don't know, there's some motivational edge here, but I think it's more just like Jaylen Brown's still out. That does matter, even though the Celtics have played well without him. I think the Lakers are they should be favored by a small amount, whether it should be 3, 4, 2.5, 4.5, whatever. Like, I don't think that this is off by any significant amount. So I think I'd rather just like weigh in on Tatum for DFS because like this game, I think is the one where you have to make your decision fantasy wise that kind of impacts the rest of the slate.
Yeah, we'll go to DFS now. And one last note on this game. The total's at 219. I bring that up only because the first two Celtics games of their West Coast trip have been very high scoring. Some of these numbers are insane. Their game against Utah last Friday was in the 130s. Their game, both teams scoring at least 130 is what I mean. And then their game against Portland, which again, Portland, we don't like to talk about them. They don't play any defense. But in the Lakers, they are one of the teams, they are very adept at hitting the over. Number one in the NBA, 63%. But again, public team, and LeBron's been out. So AD's been out too. Let's go to DFS. Yeah, Tatum, you got to feel good about Tatum, right? You get him sub 10K. He's at $9,400, and you find him like he's priced lower than Murray on the slate. He's priced lower. I mean, I think that rest of the names make sense. Jason Tatum's the guy, though.
Yeah, so I don't want to play any of them. That's my take. I want zero.
What do you mean?
I don't. I think he's like the worst play on the slate because Tatum. Because I think that it's all ownership. So if you're playing a cash game, right, he's the best play on the slate. So just I might have been a little like overly inflammatory, but he's going to be 60% tonight. I think possibly even higher because of the recent performance. Because he's cheaper than all the other studs. And so if you're playing a 50-50,
he gets up and he also, Chirag knows this, he gets up for Laker games. Like
I think every narrative related reason to play Tatum is like, or involving Tatum is positive for tonight. Like all of those things. So for sure, like I think all of the circumstantial things are going in his favor. And I think that's going to drive everyone to play him. But if you're playing head-to-heads and 50-50s, like you could click on him first. Like he's the safest play amongst this high range. So that's the distinction I'm going to make. He's probably going to score somewhere in the 40s in fantasy points, maybe 50. But the problem is he's one of like 8 guys that are hard to afford. And he's going to be significantly more popular than all of them. And there's so many good players. I mean, look at the games on this slate. There's so many good players. And I literally think it's true that LUKA, Durant, and Harden combined will have a lower ownership percentage than Jason Tatum by himself. So that's the reason I'm saying it. It's not because I think anything that either of you has said about Tatum is wrong. Like I actually agree with all of that, but I still think that it's not worth it because just too many people are going to have him.
So who will people not have, Meiselman? The stud that people won't have.
Yeah, so LUKA plus a Nets player. Like that's where I want to start. I think you could go the route of playing a different Celtics player and playing LeBron, Westbrook, or Davis, let's say with Al Horford. Dennis Schroeder would probably be popular also. I'm not sure he's like the best pivot, but maybe like Smart Horford.
Dennis Schroeder is probably going to be more popular than Tatum because of his salary, what he did last time against the Lakers.
They're going to both be up there. It might be semantics because they could both be 60%, which is kind of why I want to stream out. And everyone in that game is bad. The Lakers almost never do that, but maybe this is the night that happens. But I think the best contrarian move is to just pair Doncic with Harden or Durant and then find your cheap guys elsewhere because this is just not going to be a common strategy. And I think like maybe Luka's got that Q tag on him still. Like that probably scares some people off. And we talked about it before. Like if they get behind, I could see them going light on Luka's minutes. But if they don't get behind, he has massive upside. And especially if Porzingis is hampered in any way, LUKA has to do more. So I just think there's always huge upside for Luka Doncic. And like I don't think it's a stretch that he's 1/6 as popular as Tatum is. So I just like, it's just the context of the slate. It's not that I think that these guys should be way more expensive than Tatum. They actually are probably overpriced and Tatum's underpriced. It's just that the field, especially on these small slates, like we see it all the time. I think the example 2 weeks ago was like Durant was $800 cheaper than Harden. And because of that, Durant was like 65% and Harden was 12. Like something resembling that. Like this just happens a lot on these smaller slates. So I think Luka is a great play. I think Durant and Harden, maybe not in the same lineup together because it's generally difficult for them both to have really, really big games. Mm-hmm. But Luka with one of them, I think makes a lot of sense.
Okay, Chirag, how do you want to build a lineup tonight?
Well, it has to definitely start with KD. I just think that it just makes a lot of sense to play him just a little bit more expensive. Those minutes have really been there. Both those guys, Harden and Durant, have been playing extremely well, and the minutes have really been there. But I just think
since the Kevin Durant quote, remember how he was like, "Oh, I want to play more minutes." He's been trying to appease Steve Nash to keep him out there longer. He's like, "I want to play." Straight up. I want to play basketball.
Yeah.
Since that quote,
Right.
look at
Chirag, let me give you one more thing that we talked about offline before you continue with Durant, is that both of us think Durant's sitting tomorrow because the Nets are playing in Houston, and that's a James Harden game versus the Rockets. And if that's true, maybe they're just like, well, Durant's going to do more tonight because he's getting the day off tomorrow.
That's possible. I almost
like it.
Difficult to say that Durant's going to take a game off. Like, there's just been something about him since he's played in the Olympics and he's come back from the Achilles injury. I feel like he doesn't want to take any nights off since he took a bunch off last year. Like, there's just something about him that's different this year. I don't know how to say it, but yeah, KD could sit tomorrow just so that Harden can go off against Houston.
With the ultimate teammate. Eat against your old team. There you go.
I mean, if we're right, it has big implications for both the DFS slate tonight, and then also once betting lines get released for that game tomorrow. Like I was saying before we started, there's a bet I was looking at for tomorrow. That's the spot. Like the Jalen Green-less Rockets. This is like a bit of a tangent, but since Jalen Green got hurt for Houston, they're 6-0. They were 1-16 when he played.
You're going to take the Rockets and the points, especially
because it's just a bonus if Durant doesn't play either.
Right.
Like, I think it just makes sense. He just played a back-to-back over the weekend, which they actually like, it was relevant enough for them to address the media and for Nash to say like Durant's playing tomorrow. Normally you just don't say anything if the guy's going to play. But this seems like after a national TV game in Dallas, they're going to be in Houston. I guess it's not like a long trip, but 2 road games in a row. It just seems like he could sit tomorrow. So like, yeah, it could be a big thing for Houston tomorrow betting wise. And it also could be a big thing for the slate where like Durant's $1,400 more expensive than Tatum, but like Durant could put up 70 fantasy points. Yeah. Dallas is not a great defensive team, and LUKA playing makes them much worse of a defensive team. So I think Chirag and I are on the same page here. I know Chirag generally just likes Durant a lot. I definitely agree with it, at least for this game.
So real quick, going back to the betting angles for a second, Meiselman. So the fact that the numbers come down, do you feel better about the Nets covering? Like, because you like Dallas at +4, which of course is not the case anymore.
Yeah, I would still lean Dallas at +2, honestly. Like, I just think that was a misjudgment on LUKA's status, and that's why we got those 2 points, that it moved so far. I still, like, if I had to bet this game, would still bet Dallas, because I don't think like a healthy Mavericks team, which they probably are, at least like the guys who normally play are going to be out there. We haven't gotten any indication that like Porzingis will be out or anything. He's listed probable. He's probably going to play. The Nets are the better team, but they're not enough. Like, I think that this is a coin flip game. I think the Nets are probably 3 points better or something. So unless like we find out that Porzingis won't actually play tonight, I think that this is a 50-50 game, and it's still 2 points off from what the line's supposed to be in my mind. So the only way that I would like Brooklyn at this point is if the line dropped further and then we got Porzingis ruled out, where like maybe Nets -1 is appealing at that point, because then the line would probably bounce back up to like 3.
Okay. Sounds good. How about, I know we've briefly touched on value, but is there a team that you're targeting for value? Do we go to Knicks, Spurs, and just load up from that game because we think it's an evenly matched contest, and I guess we get a better read that it's going to be close, and just there's so many, I don't know, Meiselman, you kind of hit on this a little bit. Like, you feel pretty good about the Spurs being undervalued and having better players coming off the bench. They just feel a little bit better from a depth perspective.
Yeah, the other thing to note, though, is this Knicks situation where Tibbs is telling us we're going to see a different rotation. And the fact that game is at 8:30, which is an hour after lock, that's going to make it pretty difficult to determine what the field is going to do, because let's say we find out that Obi Toppin is starting. That's like, the timing of that will be everything as far as if the field is using him in any like reasonable capacity or not. Because if we don't know until 8:20 that Toppin's going to start, or if he doesn't start at all, like no one's playing him. But if we find out like in 15 minutes that Toppin is starting, he's he's probably right up there with Tatum and Schroeder as like top guy on the slate, because he's like close to the minimum and you could project like 30 minutes.
All right.
So
we have some news.
Breaking Chirag.
Breaking news. LUKA Doncic, Tim Hardaway Jr., and Kristaps Porzingis are all available to play.
So I think we're going to see this line shift a little bit closer to even now. Just there might have been like a little uncertainty left for Dallas, Brooklyn. It probably gets down to like 1.5 or 1. So, it's most of the way there already. I'll probably get a little closer to pick him.
Good job getting it 4. Good job.
Thank you. Well, I mean, Luke and I are friends, and he tells me sometimes when he's going to play and not play.
Yeah, he just texted him.
I have every NBA player's contact information in my phone.
Well, you got left on red from Paul George. So
I don't know what I did to, piss him off, but clearly something. I don't know what I said about him. Maybe he's like good friends with Westbrook and he doesn't like that I've been trashing him all season. I don't know what's going on there.
So, but to kind of come back around on your point about the Knicks rotation. So I guess so like you said, if you want to try and stay away from Tatum, take Luka, pick Durant or Harden, and then you can get value guys in San Antonio because that rotation feels pretty cemented.
Yeah, and then it's kind of contest dependent. So like you're also, one of the things I really love about these smaller slates, especially when the times are spread out like this, is you can see how your lineup's doing and then decide based on that. So like if you have Luka and Durant and they're going off at halftime, you could just plug in the chalk the rest of your lineup if you're in a small contest, because at that point, like you're so far ahead and there's just not that many people you're competing against. And you don't have to worry that like Lonnie Walker's 30% because you already have such an advantage. You just don't have to think about that anymore. If you're playing a really, really large contest, you probably still have to stay contrarian. So like some of these Spurs guys who I think are underpriced, like Lonnie Walker, Keldon Johnson, Jakob Poeltl, like, and then maybe a couple of the Knicks too, you might want to try to be even more contrarian if you're in a really, really big tournament. So it kind of depends. But I do think that there's a lot from this game and it doesn't need to be the obvious guys. Like it could be Doug McDermott, who probably not a lot of people are playing. But the other thing quickly is there's a lot of cheap players in Dallas, Brooklyn, who you could probably add in some kind of game stack too, where like James Johnson maybe picks up some extra minutes because someone else is in foul trouble, or Bembry or Maxi Kleber, like one of those kind of guys. So it's really hard to say. Like it depends how you're starting your lineup. I think that the reason Tatum is going to be so popular is there's no one around minimum that is that appealing. Like it just is there isn't someone who's like, oh, this guy's 3,500 and he's playing half the game tonight or more. There's none of those people.
Right.
So it's
Lonnie
just
Walker's
like,
the only guy that's kind of close there.
Right. So do you want to play like a 60% Tatum and a 35% Walker, or would you rather have like 15% Luka and like maybe 6% James Johnson or 8% Obi Toppin, who normally would play 14 minutes, but like then maybe someone gets in foul trouble and they pick up extra time. Like that's your path to being much different than the field and potentially coming out ahead. Because like I don't actually think the Tatum Walker combination is that much better. I do think it is better if we weren't considering the field, but I don't think it's that much better. Like it's not, maybe you're getting like 7 extra points on average from like a Tatum Walker combination than like I'll give an even crazier example, like a Harden Cameron Thomas combination. Like these are guys in the rotation who could just like get hot and play a few extra minutes and do well. So it's just like, it's a weird slate because we don't have anything that stands out that much except for like a few guys.
If the Knicks were playing, and I bring the Knicks up because of the rotation changes that Thibodeau has been hinting at. If the Knicks were playing at 7:30, I think we'd feel better, right? Because then we're going to find out, okay, here's the starting lineup. There might be some more reporting coming out from beat reporters on the scene as to what it might look like. There might be some leaks. But the fact we got to wait, and there's a game starting before that with Luka Doncic, James Harden, and Kevin Durant makes it challenging.
Yeah,
sure.
It would make it easier for us if that were true, but it would also make it easier for everybody. So
that's true.
I don't know which is like, I don't know if that's better or worse necessarily. It depends how capable you are on a personal level.
It depends on how smart you are, right? You're challenging how smart people are. Yes.
Yeah. If you feel really confident in your ability to make quick decisions when these things happen, you prefer that the game with the most uncertainty is the latest. But if you just want to set your lineup and go to sleep, maybe you want it to be the opposite.
Chirag, I'm starting to find out about Matt Meiselman. He's very much into how to manipulate people and how you have to be good at making fast decisions in a small window. Last night, he was telling us, hey, maybe on the over-under, we should wait till halftime. And in that 15 minutes, look at the forecast, make a decision. How do you feel about the over-under? Here he is
you guys
now.
Didn't see me? I was out there on the field testing out the weather.
Yeah. No, I mean, honestly, like I talk to Matt basically every day about either creating content for the Bruins, creating content on the sports book, creating content for NFTs, any kind of different stuff that we talk about every day, but we also come back and we have a conversation pretty much every day about sports betting or stuff like that. And honestly, those conversations have just upped my game because he keeps me like, he'll know, like he is literally a wizard. He will guess guys that are out. I think maybe now that I'm a little bit more plugged in and I've been following all the games, I can see where his wizardry is coming from. But
I have all the players in my phone. That's what it is.
Yeah. But honestly, like,
he got Chris Stapps wrong.
It's
tonight.
those moments that we have those conversations, and it's like, be ready for this. I'm like, hey, I gotta go. I've been on the computer all day. I'm gonna go for a walk and come back for the 5:30 injury report or whatever. And it's like, you gotta be on top of it right away, and that's the way to get the biggest edge. Because, and we've talked about this, it doesn't matter if you win or lose the bet. The outcome is not actually the part that's important. It's, did you make a bet that was correct? The closing line value moved in your favor and you live with the result. And that's kind of been the biggest hurdle that I've had to actually come over, is just figuring out, you know what? I lost this bet or I won this bet. It doesn't matter. It's cool to celebrate winning bets on Twitter. I did it all the last couple of days because I've been on fire, but
is he talking to me? Might be talking. He's talking to me. That was a shot.
No, it wasn't. But the more important thing is, like, today we jumped right on that Mavs news because that's what we were waiting for. Like, yeah, it's an easier on a 3-game slate. Yesterday there was 103 injury situations to monitor on yesterday's slate. Like, that's a lot going on. Right. So I think that's the most important thing that I've learned, is just being on top of it, and it doesn't matter. Now, if KD and Harden just play out of their mind and the Nets win by 20, whatever. I'm winning this spread right now by 3 points, and you just have to live with the results.
Right. And another thing too, to go complete opposite of what you said, and we got to wrap here, but the benefits of betting early. When the line comes out, you got it at 4, and Meiselman, using his amazing prediction powers, turns out, getting the number at 4 is a pretty good number, because, as he said, it's come down to 2. It might go down to 1.5. Betting early makes sense. Spurs at +2.5. Now it's at +1.5. So there is benefit to betting early if you can make a read on a team's injury situation or a load management situation. We have to go because there are Madden Sims coming up on this Tuesday night. Thanks to both of you. Great show. Really great breakdown. Beginning of the show, future stuff. Middle of the show, the 3 games tonight, and then the end of the show, basically telling Matt Meiselman he's really good at this job. So that's going to do it. Thanks to Eamon and Tom, Chirag, and Matt. Brendan Glasheen saying so long. You all have a great night and best of luck with your bets and your DFS lineups. We'll see you later.